Hello, I'm Patricia Gras. Welcome to Passion Time. I'm here with a very talented young woman, Loris Simon Salum. She is an author, a filmmaker, a director of a film festival. I don't know what else she can do. Today we're going to talk about her book, Ensoulment, which is exploring the feminine principle in Western culture. Now, this book is based on a film she did called, an award-winning film, mind you, called Ensoulment. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Pati.
Okay, I really love this book, not because I'm in it, but seriously, no, because I really enjoyed the fact that you cared enough to go search the ensoulment part of the feminine. So let's talk about ensoulment first. So what is ensoulment? No, before we start, what is your passion and how are you living your passion?
Well, my passion is, I think, witnessing the process of how the unspoken things in our world take form. I think that's what I would say.
What does that mean, though, in unspoken things that take form? Like,
I think I would say, for example, whenever you are feeling like there is some sort of injustice in the world, and then you come up with a story, and then you bring it into a film, for example, just witnessing that process of something that was unspoken within you,
okay.
And then how it takes life.
Beautiful. Okay, let's talk about ensoulment. Ensoulment meaning finding your soul, right? It's when
I think that would be a
soul. Why did you call it this?
Well, we had a really hard time finding a title because we didn't want to call it the feminine. Just we were afraid that it was going to
turn people off.
Yeah, make people think that it was only about women.
Okay.
And then I found this word that was mentioned by James Hollis during our interviews, and I looked it up, and there's a huge debate about it. Ensoulment is the term that happens when the soul actually enters the embryo, when a baby comes. Yeah. It's controversial. So it's a religious debate, but I took it as a more metaphorical sense for the title, and it's really when the soul enters your body and just in your life, when you awaken, when that moment happens.
Let's talk about awakening. The book is you're exploring the feminine. Why did you feel that was necessary?
It did not start that way, actually. Initially, I started with the idea when I was 19, and my mother took me to the Marion Woodman Foundation retreat with Paula Reeves and Mary Hamilton, among others. And it's a Jungian-based retreat that talked about the feminine. And back then, I thought they were talking about women. But as I started the documentary, the types of questions I was asking, it led me to realize, no, I'm not talking about women. I'm talking about something that is much deeper. And in fact, it made me realize the things that were moving inside of me that made me think that this was a very important topic. And from my perspective, it started in I think moving to the US from Mexico, feeling like I had been taken out of my roots, my culture. I did not belong anywhere. And then growing a little bit older, finding myself having trouble as a woman, finding your place. I was just all over the place, also with my body, trying to be thin, trying to be this, trying to be that. And so when I heard about the feminine, I said, oh yeah, it's what women are going through. But then it was a much more profound topic that had to do with listening to yourself and connecting yourself with the world and just finding out who you are, asking the right questions. So that's when I realized that the feminine was that. It was about your feeling side, your emotional side, being receptive, being creative, just the opening up to the world, taking in, listening, which usually women do tend to be more associated with those qualities. But in fact, men can be just as creative. They can be just as nurturing as women, sometimes more. So it's a topic that has to do with any gender.
Right, exactly. It's the characteristics of the feminine that we're talking about. Talk to me about you. This book is interviews with all kinds of people, intellectuals or writers or filmmakers or journalists, whatever. You talk to so many people. I'm just wondering, did you have any moment of truth through this research and these interviews that you did?
For sure. I had many moments of truth. I think the first one was whenever we were interviewing Sheila Langston. She's also from the Marian Woodman Foundation. And back then we were asking about femininity. And she said, do you mean femininity or do you mean the feminine? Because femininity, I imagine, has to do more with fluffy things and pink things and
pretty and makeup and
yeah,
a little girly girl.
And the feminine had more to do with it carried the same weight as a goddess, something that just permeates.
Sacred.
Yes. So that's when it clicked, and I said, okay, no, I'm talking about the feminine, and I changed the language I was using. Another moment of truth was in speaking with James Hollis, whenever he was talking to us about the condition of men and the pressures that they were facing and how much focus we placed on women and what they needed, and we never really spoke about men. That was just, my eyes opened. And I can talk about all of these. The last one I'll mention is whenever we were speaking about with Cynthia Eller, Dr. Cynthia Eller, and she studies religion. So she wrote a book about saying that the matriarchy, a lot of feminists carry this theory that before there was a patriarchy, there was a matriarchy.
There was.
And she, in her book, she says that there wasn't, that there have always been in this position of just a lower position. So we discussed that maybe it had to do with, it came down to just physical size, that men were bigger than women, and so that back in the day made the big difference of who got the final say, you know? So a lot of things.
Does that have anything to do with like women's rights and everything like that?
What do you think about feminine?
The feminine is a principle. It's not a thing. It has nothing to do with gender.
Whatever the feminine is, we've historically associated with innerness. Represents a capacity.
It's all that inner world, and historically speaking, those characteristics have been associated more with women. So I think women just got packed in with that bundle and thrown under the bus. But if you think about it, men also devalue those qualities in themselves just as much as women. So I think it's a play of different things, you know. Whenever we all try to only enhance our masculine side, you get the society that we live in, that it only values structure, it only values logical thinking, making more money, hierarchies. And those are very necessary, but that's not it. I mean, there's so many other things that make up this world. So that, I think, is a huge factor. And I was reading the other day this philosopher, her name is Christina Sommers, and she talked about how in developed worlds that women tend to bargain less than men whenever they get a new job, so that they don't.
So this is it's proven.
And also women tend to go for jobs that pay less in general. So nonprofits, jobs that involve helping others, and sometimes part-time as well, because a lot of us are mothers. So that also influenced in why women get paid less. So it wasn't necessarily a situation where whenever you have a competent woman and a competent man, women always get paid less. It was also the choices behind what women were doing that made them get paid less. So there was something there to be said.
That men make themselves sound much better than that women undermine their qualities and qualifications while men exaggerate theirs.
Yeah, and it's a play between everyone. I think everyone is involved, and whenever you want a change, I mean, it has to come from the inside out. Because if women do want to get paid more, not only do they have to exercise that assertiveness or even a little bit of aggression, but they also have to go into a job that is actually a good paying job. You're never going to get paid the same as someone in banking if you are working in a shelter.
As a journalist.
I mean, those are just facts about, how the world works. And another thing that I could add on to that is that a lot of women are trying to become men, and whenever they're trying to seek out their lives professionally. And I think there's also something that weakens you whenever you try to do that, because we're not men. And you're again devaluing yourself for not being a man by trying to be that. You have to give value to what you are and bring that out into the world. And we're not joining forces in that sense. I think we're still trying to be more like men so that we can be equal to men, but that's not how it works.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Did you find that there's a country that does better in this topic as far as the valuing the feminine? Did you find anything like that?
I think that there are different countries that express it in different ways. For example, Hinduism or Buddhism, you have more goddesses. And in theory, they admire the feminine more so than Western cultures, perhaps. But when it comes to reality, it doesn't necessarily translate in Mexico. So I think it's the same, it's just in different ways.
And what do you think is the solution? I mean, you're going to have, I'm sure you're going to have kids. If you have a daughter, what are after you did this and what you learned from doing this, how would you treat her? What would you teach her to be happy? Not necessarily what success means, which is making lots of money, but just to be a happier person in this world where the feminine is not as appreciated as the masculine.
I think it really comes down to learning how to listen to yourself and developing a language on how to navigate your own feelings and your instincts and all those things that happen inside of you. Because the more you learn about your own truth, the better you can function in life. So there is a balance between understanding who you are and growing and strengthening yourself in a pure sense. And then there's also the factor of adapting into the world. You can't just float around and forcing everyone to adapt to you. It's a play. It's a play between masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
So I think there's a balance of that.
It sounds like the yin and yang and know thyself.
Exactly.
One last question. You wrote this and you worked on this film, this award-winning film and book, before President Trump became president. And then there was a march, a huge march. Did it surprise you that this march just took off? I mean, it took over the world.
It did.
Even in Antarctica, they were having marches as a response to whatever was happening. Did this surprise you?
I think it did. It really did, because I wasn't expecting, maybe I underestimated people. I didn't believe that they would come together at that dimension. And when I saw the marches, I was just shocked. I was taken aback, because it was a great thing to see all these women come together and say, this is enough. What year do we live in? I mean, come on. And especially the US, it's one of the countries that have been a role model for the rest of the world in terms of women's rights, and to just take steps back, it was unthinkable. So it was a shocking thing, but wonderful at the same time.
One last question. Why should people read Ensoulment?
Well, I think they should read Ensoulment because everybody needs to make that step towards knowing themselves better. And there's no how-to method and how to do that. So I hope that what people take away from this is that there's a world inside of you, and it's your responsibility to get to know it in order to have a happy and fulfilled life. So
thank you so much. Know thyself.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Loris.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you, and it's great to have you watching us. And I want to thank Melina Levine for doing my makeup, Literal Magazine for providing sponsorship, and Oros Joyeria for the jewelry. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.